Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. Okay, all sorted. That's what I'm up to. And for me practice on atrophy, I've mostly got that size hook for this stuff. So bring it back in. And it's working, so not only that, I'm going to use that for the bag I want to make. And if it's a success, then I'll be making more. But earlier on today, we've been basically spring cleaning trying to get the an early start of spring cleaning. better than you. I really do. It has gone freezing. Something's gonna fall. Playing the song in a different way. Something's gonna fall. Playing the song in a different way. Down in the trust. Hope everybody is okay. Never felt so long. Take it back down. I keep searching deep within my soul for answers that I have known. is what you say. Not sure where is everyone, but I don't care. Something.
In 1995, police in California received an anonymous letter which identified a pair of severed hands as those of a Navy pilot who had been murdered. The letter described the murder in gruesome detail. Investigators searched for some clue to the identity of the author and the killer. San Diego, the second largest city in California, its bay is one of the finest natural harbors in the world and is home to one of the largest naval bases in the country. In 1994, workers at the San Diego Fibers Corporation were sifting through some cardboard in a recycling bin. They made a gruesome discovery. 2 human hands.
First, I wasn't sure that this was legitimate. I thought, a pair of human hands found in dumpsters seemed a little bit strange.
And we collected evidence as if it was a normal homicide with a complete body. This was a little bit different because all we had were hands.
X-rays showed degenerative damage of the joints consistent with an individual over age 60, and the size of the fingers and knuckles indicated they were men's hands. The right hand had one distinctive feature. The thumbnail was missing. Detectives checked local hospitals and morgues to see if they had a body of an elderly man without hands. On the other side of town, Mary Mead and Terry Holland were beginning to worry. They hadn't seen their father, Don Hardin, in more than a week.
And I called everybody that I could possibly get a hold of. Have you seen him? Have you heard from him? Nobody had heard anything. So that's at the point where I really got scared, because I thought, where would he have gone?
It's very hard to explain. You go through scared, and then almost an anger, and then worry.
When police learned that Don Hardin was missing the thumbnail of his right hand, they knew immediately, and the fingerprint analysis confirmed that the hands were those of 74-year-old retired Navy pilot Don Hardin.
It's a shock. I felt that we were in some badly produced police story from TV. I mean, this doesn't happen in real life, and it just really threw us for a loop.
When homicide detectives searched Don Hardin's home, they found evidence of robbery. The television, VCR, and microwave oven were all missing. So was Hardin's pickup truck. The TV guide was opened to March 28th, which was probably the last day Don Hardin was home. Small drops of blood were found in the kitchen, and it appeared that detergents and bleach had been used to wash the kitchen and bathroom floors.
We were under the impression that it was either a missing persons report or a theft involved with a missing person. You never lose hope. You never lose hope.
Don Hardin was a widower who had moved to San Diego a few years earlier to be near his daughters. Neighbors described Hardin as ornery and difficult, but his daughters remembered him as a loving father.
One of my cherished thoughts that I have of him is that every time I spoke to him on the telephone, at the end of our conversation, I always said, "I love you, Dad," and he'd say, "I love you too, kiddo."
Hardin had a history of helping those in need. He often hired homeless men to do odd jobs around his property, and he often let them live in a camper in his backyard.
We were very comforted knowing that there was somebody there in case of an emergency, that my father could be taken care of immediately.
Wow, I think that's really great. There's a guy there that can kind of keep an eye on Dad. He's kind of a companion to Dad. Gives him some, someone to talk to. He helps him out. I felt good about it.
Police were on the lookout for the items stolen from Hardin's home.
We in fact did recover some of Mr. Hardin's property. It was, I believe it was a wallet and a driver's license and maybe some Army medals. And we followed that up on that to find out if that would lead back to a suspect. That was kind of a dead end. It was found in a dumpster, and we really couldn't put that back to a viable suspect.
Investigators had no idea what happened to the rest of Don Hardin's body, but they suspected something terrible happened inside his home. A pair of severed hands found at a San Diego recycling plant were identified as those of 74-year-old Don Hardin, a retired Navy pilot. A search of Hardin's home revealed evidence of burglary and violence.
We were in the kitchen, and the kitchen floor had a fine white powdery substance unevenly applied over the whole floor. It was pretty obvious that some cleanser had been used to clean the floor up.
We noticed that there were blood spots throughout the carpet, which led from the kitchen around through the living room and towards the bathroom.
Behind the hamper, detectives found a blood stain and some human tissue inside the heating grate. To find out whether blood had been cleaned up, detectives administered luminol, a chemical which fluoresces when it comes into contact with the iron component of blood, even after it has been removed with water and detergents.
When you spray luminol, it doesn't really hurt the blood itself. It helps you find it, so it doesn't compromise the evidence. It just helps you locate the evidence. It helps you find a scenario as far as what happened. It's a presumptive, it's not a conclusive, but it's a tool that we use.
After spraying the luminol, the lights are extinguished, and the camera with high-speed film captures the images.
It was the largest glow of luminol I had ever seen in my life. It glowed like a Christmas tree.
Police found a huge amount of blood on the kitchen floor, and a blood trail leading from the kitchen to the bathroom. And in the bathroom, there was even more blood. DNA tests revealed the blood was Don Harden's. The amount of blood led forensic pathologists to conclude that Harden could not have survived such a devastating attack.
I go over to the couch and we sit down, and he says, there's positive proof that your father was killed in the kitchen and he was dismembered in the bathroom. And he is dead. It's positive proof that he is dead.
It didn't sink in for quite some time. But there's disbelief. There's the question why. What could have possibly provoked it?
Harden led a simple life in retirement, similar to other naval retirees in San Diego. So who would want him dead? And who would go to such lengths to conceal the murder? The day before he disappeared, neighbors saw Don Harden with one of the homeless men he allowed to live in his backyard camper. His name was Dale Whitmer, a 41-year-old drifter who had a police record for vagrancy and intoxication, but no past history of violence.
Going out to the car, was carrying something wrapped up in a piece of cloth, a bundle, like putting it in the rear seat.
Whitmer
Hi,
denied
Patrick.
any knowledge of Don Harden's
Yes,
whereabouts.
Puzzle.
Whitmer said that Harden had loaned him the pickup truck,
I'm
but hadn't
trying to
seen
figure
him
it
since.
out.
He said he
My
worked
head's
for
not
Harden on and off for years, and said he regarded the old man
It's,
almost like a
picture
father.
of-
But friends and neighbors disputed that.
Dale had told other people, neighbors, that the old
I figured out, obviously, the bottom bit, which you can see. That was fine. Then I thought I'd better start on the roofing section because I was going to get on with the sky. This bit. But my mind's just gone right different way. Yes, it's a scene of Norfolk in England. I picked it out because my aunt lives in Norfolk, so it reminds me of her. I've never been to Norfolk, so I've never ever been. So I thought it would be a good idea to do a puzzle of it. Hello, there you are. It's your influence. Bleeding neck. I only managed to put 3 pieces in since I last started live. Oh my god. Brain is just... Boy, have you been behaving yourself, Mr. Stevens? And yes, I used your phone. Hey, hey, baby, I wanna know if you'd be my girl. Hey, hey, baby, I wanna know if you'd be my girl. So pretty, she's so pretty, she's so pretty. I'm gonna make her mine. Hey, baby, I wanna know if you'd be my girl. I'm walking down the street, I get out, got her to me. She's so pretty, love so fine. Dirty, dirty dancing. If only they had Beat Saber for freaking... What's it? Never mind. We walk together, hand in hand. Do 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 do. This just reminds me of the model kit I used to do when I first started model work, as in model making. It just so exactly feels like the same thing, but as in puzzle form. Because of this bit. And I remember I had to paint individually the panels and the black. Walking down the street. Na, 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 na. She's so pretty, loves to smile. La da 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 dee dee dee. Shade. No. Hiya, Rocket. Yeah, we'll be on. What? Yeah, not to worry. Hiya, Scratch Master. That's all the blue sky, I'm guessing. Yes, it is. Something's gonna fall on my heart.
Man was bothering him, and that he was really getting mad, and that he was tired of the old man poking him and calling him names and belittling him.
I want you to take your time. I want you to look at it closely.
During the police interrogation, Whitmer was shown a photograph of the severed hands.
They're Don Hardin's hands.
How did you know that?
And we asked him how he could know such a thing, and he just said he'd grown accustomed to seeing them over the year that they'd been together, and he just recognized them as being Mr. Hardin's hands.
But Whitmer would say no more. When police asked him to take a lie detector test, he refused. Whitmer's fingerprints were found inside Hardin's home. But since he did odd jobs for Hardin, this wasn't unusual.
Mr. Whitmer was very nonchalant. He talked to us, had an answer for almost every question that we had, and just told us that I don't know where he is. He asked me to do a few things for him. I was driving his truck as he let me. He asked me to take some things from his house and give them to other people, and I did.
With no other leads, the case of Don Hardin's disappearance went unsolved for over a year. Until police received an anonymous letter that contained details of Don Hardin's murder that hadn't been released to the public. Forensic evidence indicated that Don Hardin had been murdered inside his home, but all investigators ever recovered were his severed hands. More than a year after Don Hardin's disappearance, police received a tip. An anonymous letter arrived at police headquarters containing details about Don Hardin's murder.
When I read it, I realized that whoever wrote the letter or provided the information for the letter knew something about our crime. There were things in the letter that only a suspect would know. I got real excited about it.
The writer said that his friend, Bob, had identified Don Hardin's killer.
He was murdered by Dale Whitmer. Dale hated Mr. Hardin, who abused him by hitting him with a cane if he didn't work hard enough. Dale's a heroin addict who lived behind Mr. Hardin's home for a year or so before the murder. He put the body into the bathtub, dismembered his body, put it in garbage bags, and buried different bags all over the county and Mexico.
Hardin's dismemberment in the bathtub was the information that had not been released to the public. The letter went on to say that Bob would not come forward to testify against Dale Whitmer.
I asked him to contact you directly, but he didn't feel like he could do it. Bob is convinced that Dale will know Bob is the source of the information and may try to silence him or hurt him in some way.
It was clear that the writer of the letter wanted to help, but did not want to get involved.
Good luck, Detective.
The Forensic Documents Office at the San Diego Police Department analyzed the letter and looked at the postmark for a clue to its origin. The letter wasn't mailed with stamps, but had gone through a postal meter, the type businesses normally use. Each postal meter prints a number on the envelope, which is the meter's registration number. But the writer had covered the number with white ink in an effort to conceal the letter's origin.
We can look at letters for trace evidence, latent evidence, and in this case, obliterated evidence, and quite often find something that would allow us to source that document. But we can't always.
Using what is known as a video spectral comparator, various light sources and filter combinations can often reveal what is hidden underneath ink and markers. The first attempts to see the meter number were unsuccessful. So Hugh Kerfman, the operator of the comparator, tried looking through the opposite side of the envelope by cutting it in half. He then used a blue-green light to penetrate the white ink, and it worked.
So it was a pretty clear image, and Detective Lang looked at it and quickly said, well, there it is.
The number of the meter, 5197451. The initials PB on the postmark indicated the manufacturer, Pitney Bowes. The serial number revealed the state, city, street name, and office address of the postal meter. It was located at Davis Capital Management in La Mesa, California. The owner of the company was Mark Davis, who was also a bishop in the Mormon Church. When confronted by police, Davis admitted that he wrote the anonymous letter. The source of his information was a member of his church. But Davis refused to identify the source further, citing the religious privilege that exists between the clergy and a church member. Prosecutors took Mark Davis to court, and a judge ruled against him.
The religious privilege hurdle is not absolute in the sense that not every communication with a clergyman is protected. In this instance, the judge found that there was actually a good argument that this was not protected by the priest penitent or clergyman penitent privilege.
The court ruled that the information might have been privileged at one time, but once Davis wrote the letter to police, the privilege was broken. Mark Davis complied with the court ruling and identified the source of the information. Bob was Dale Whitmer's own daughter, Andrea.
She was the trickiest, most difficult, most sensitive witness we had to deal with, in that she loved her father, even though he had murdered this man, and that's something that you would expect. She also never expected to be found out, and yes, she was, and she was dragged into this.
Dale Whitmer was arrested and charged with murder.
Sir, you state your true name, please.
Dale Calvin Whitmer.
On September 15, 1997, Dale Whitmer went on trial for the murder of Don Hardin. He pleaded not guilty. The star witness against him, his daughter Andrea, found herself in a difficult position.
If she lies on the stand to protect her father, she betrays her God. If she tells the truth on the stand, she is true to her religion, but she betrays her father. Which one do you choose if you're Andrea Whitmer?
Andrea Whitmer chose to tell the truth, and she corroborated everything that Mark Davis had written in his letter. The letter said Dale Whitmer was a heroin addict and desperately needed money. Prosecutors believe that on March 28, 1994, Dale Whitmer walked into Don Hardin's kitchen and killed him. The motive was robbery and revenge for past abusive treatment. The luminol evidence suggests that Hardin was bleeding profusely in the kitchen, and the body was dismembered in the bathtub. Traces of blood and human tissue were found behind the hamper on the heating grate. Whitmer later removed the blood evidence with water and detergents, but the iron component in the blood was easily detected by the luminol. Whitmer stole Hardin's TV, VCR, and microwave oven and sold the items to buy drugs. Over time, Whitmer disposed of Hardin's body parts in numerous dumpsters throughout San Diego and Mexico. The hands were the only part of Don Hardin's body ever recovered. The jury found Dale Whitmer guilty of second-degree murder. Don Hardin's daughters asked for permission to address the court before sentencing, which wasn't an easy thing to do.
He almost got away with committing this hideous crime. I am grateful he will be in prison and not able to inflict himself on another family. This ordeal has renewed my faith in the criminal justice system.
Life without my father, and Father's Day is the hardest for me. We really miss him. I find myself still wanting to pick up the telephone and call him.
This is a chilling murder.
Dale Whitmer was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison.
We would have been unable to prosecute him but for the luminol work and, of course, a letter.
It would have been unsolved. There was a probability that we would have known who did it, but we would never been able to prove it.
Obviously, finding the hands was an important case, but the forensics allowed us to examine the scene and find the amount of blood loss that was there at the scene, the extent of the scene, and obviously the envelope played a very, very big part in this case.
I hope that with all the forensic technology that they have, that anyone that's possibly even thinking of doing any kind of wrongdoing, that they'll stop and think about it before they do it, because with all the forensic technology that's out there, they're going to be caught.
After the trial, Don Hardin's hands were cremated and his ashes were buried by the U.S. Navy at sea off the coast of California.
after it was all over, we just felt so much better. We felt like, okay, it's closed now. Dad's had his proper burial at sea. It's over.
Those were his final wishes, and we carried out those wishes.
Getting ready to glue this panel. Bloody hell. Thought you would have got a bit further than that.
No, I'm getting a bit.
Bit what? You do pump burst, easier.
That's what I'm doing.
In 1996,
You just need
a
all the
fire
Tudor
broke
bits
out
in.
in a rental home in North Carolina. One child died. Another was critically injured. To the family, the fire was a mystery. To investigators, it was murder. Tabor City, North Carolina, a small, rural sweet potato farming community in the western part of the state and home to the Hinson family.
Joshua's first Christmas. Merry Christmas, buddy.
Joshua Hinson and his sister Brittany lived with their mother Terry and her boyfriend Rodney Strickland. Rodney worked in construction. Terry was a homemaker and student. On October 19, 1996, Rodney left to spend the night with his son in Fairbluff, about 15 miles away. Terry's mother, Bernice, came over to the house that night for dinner.
I was there when she took Brittany and Josh upstairs to bed. And as they were going upstairs to bed, the last words I heard Josh say is, "I love you," because he was just learning to talk.
After Bernice left, Terry plugged in a space heater to heat the home since it was the first cold night of fall. She fell asleep on the sofa in the living room around midnight. At 4 a.m., Terry was awakened by screams from her children. The house was on fire. The thick smoke and flames made it impossible to reach the children. The only thing Terry could do was call the fire department. The police arrived first, and an officer also tried to rescue the children. He too was unsuccessful.
He went kind of past me and got almost to the top of the stairway and said, "We can't get in."
To clear the way, Terry moved the space heater at the bottom of the stairs. By the time firemen arrived, the upstairs was almost entirely in flames. The children were rushed to the hospital, both in critical condition.
It's really hard to recognize her as Brittany. She was black from head to toe. And they told me when I got there they didn't think she'd make it.
Brittany was fortunate. She survived the fire. Tragically, 17-month-old Joshua did not.
They finally came out and said that he didn't make it. They did ask me if I wanted to see him. They suggested I didn't. That I could, that, you know, they had to ask. And, I didn't.
Yeah, I really loved him a lot. I really loved him like he was my actual child. I loved him like that. I wanted my baby brother to at least have a long life. Because he didn't hardly even had a life. He was too young to die.
When the fire was extinguished, local authorities found evidence that the fire started in the children's bedroom closet. At first, they thought that Brittany might have been playing with matches, but when they looked into Terry Hinson's background, they uncovered information which made them suspect it might have been murder. Brittany Hinson, now 8 years old, remembers the horrible fire that burned through her home 4 years earlier.
I was burnt all over, and I had died, and I was up in heaven, and believe me, it's beautiful. And the rivers were rainbow paths and bridges, and were gold, and the houses were made out of clouds, which had the names on top that were of the people that would own them. I'm special because I had died and I came back alive. That's why I think I'm special.
Her younger brother Joshua, just 17 months old, died in the fire.
I just miss him a lot. I wish he hadn't died. I mean, he was so young.
With any kind of house fire, officials try to identify the cause. Generally, a fire burns longest at or near its point of origin, so the room with the most damage is usually where the fire started. Most of the damage was in Joshua's bedroom, which was at the top of the stairs. Investigators found a V-shaped pattern on the wall in Joshua's bedroom closet. It's a pattern that occurs when something combustible is against a wall. This discovery told investigators that the fire started on the closet floor and traveled up to the attic. A melted copper electrical wire was hanging from the attic, which investigators concluded had been burned in the fire and was not the cause of it. Special agents from the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation and the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms assisted in the investigation. They eliminated the nearby electrical outlet as the cause. And when they couldn't determine how the fire started, they concluded that someone had set it intentionally with a match or lighter.
I was told by the state agent that anyone who was in that house that night was a suspect. Anyone who had been in the house that evening would have been.
Investigators first talked to Brittany to see if she had been playing with matches that night. They were satisfied she had not. Next, they wanted to know where Terry's boyfriend Rodney was at the time of the fire.
Rodney had plenty of alibis. He was back in Fair Bluff with his son, spending the night. Plenty of people saw him.
But investigators were most suspicious of Terry, since she was sleeping on the sofa downstairs when the fire broke out, instead of in her bedroom upstairs. And they also discovered that a few years earlier, she had given 3 older children up for adoption.
The only reason Terry let those children go was because she did love them enough to want the best for them. And at that time, she could not give them anything, not even a home. She didn't have a job, she didn't have a car, she didn't have no money, she didn't have anything.
People made a leap from that event, the adoptions, to somehow that becoming a motive for killing her other child.
Witnesses also told police that at the fire scene, Terry behaved suspiciously.
Her mama said that she had been depressed, so she had been bringing books over for her to read at night. And her boyfriend said that she would sleep on the couch.
They just didn't think Terry was acting the way a mother would act if a child had been killed in a fire. There was just something wrong to them about it.
She was blamed for the fire. She was blamed that she's the one who did the fire. She didn't do it. She didn't do a single thing.
Terry denied having anything to do with setting the fire.
I was actually the only one considered. They had to eliminate Brittany because she was a child that could have started a fire at that age. Rodney couldn't be considered because he wasn't there. He was 12, 15 miles away.
Police arrested Terry Henson and charged her with murder, attempted murder, and arson. And her nightmare continued when her own lawyer hired an independent investigator who agreed with the prosecution that the fire had been intentionally set.
Liquid piss, that glue.
I mean, it took me a long time to
Not
realize my
big.
attorney wasn't going to help me.
Like I
I
thought
still
it'd be.
held a lot of faith that he was going to do something.
Yeah,
And
man.
I finally realized that he's not.
Bet you put that.
If convicted, Terry could face the death penalty. For 61 days, Terry Henson sat in a North Carolina
Oh,
jail
that was
cell,
under the windows.
waiting to be tried for murder and arson. Eventually, Terry was released on a $200,000 bond, but remained under house arrest. And with no one else to turn to, Terry conducted her own research into the fire that killed her son Joshua. First, with her computer, she made a search on the internet. She typed in the word fire.
I spent several days, probably weeks, looking on the internet for something that would help my case. I didn't understand the internet as far as there being actually people out there that you could talk to. Wasn't sure of how to talk to them if I did know.
It was slow going until Terry found an article written by a fire investigator in Sydney, Australia.
Is it an accidental fire or arson? By Tony Cave.
I see what you mean.
The article
I
described
thought you
common
did eat it,
mistakes
it's all distracting,
investigators
it's not,
make
is it?
when determining the cause of a
That's why I'm a
suspicious
little
fire.
bit,
Specifically, it discussed the role of bias in fire investigation. For example, arson investigators tend to look for arson, and insurance investigators tend to look for insurance fraud. The article recommends that fire investigators have a scientific or chemical background. Terry desperately wanted to get in touch with the author.
I didn't understand email. When I saw the little envelope thing on his page, I clicked on it, and it's, you know, like a blank page pops up for you to type in. So I just assumed, okay, well, I can send this to him. And I still didn't understand how he would get back to me.
The author, Tony Cave, did respond. But since he lived in Australia, he recommended Dr. Gerald Hurst in Austin, Texas. Dr. Hurst earned his PhD in chemistry from Cambridge, and he agreed to look into Terry's case.
Homeowners burning a house down to kill their children, pretty rare. Very rare.
Terry sent Dr. Hurst every piece of information she had about the fire. After reading through it, Dr. Hurst was struck by how incomplete the local investigation had been.
I decided to concentrate on the attic precisely because they had said almost nothing about the attic in the investigation report. The attic was a complete revelation.
The insulation in the attic was made of ground-up newspaper treated with a flame-retardant chemical. Dr. Hurst checked local weather conditions, and he discovered that Hurricane Fran had passed through Tabor City, North Carolina, just 6 weeks before the fire. Terry said the torrential rains from that hurricane leaked through the roof and caused water damage in the ceilings. Dr. Hurst also found a melted 50-year-old electrical wire in the attic insulation. Terry told Hurst there had been some electrical problems on the night of the fire. Her curling iron had been going on and off earlier that evening. And when she moved the electric space heater for the firemen, she remembers it was cold to the touch.
I picked it up with both hands, just slid it out of the way. And later is when it dawned on me that that heater should have been very hot. I mean, it had been turned on in full blast.
That meant that the heater had gone off at least a half an hour before she became aware of the fire.
Dr. Hurst and fire investigator Ken Gibson flew to North Carolina to inspect Terry's home firsthand. They did not believe the fire started the way the government investigators said.
Well, it's really very simple. Innocent people are being put into prison or forced into plea bargains for fires they did not start.
After Terry Hinson was charged with arson and murder in the death of her 17-month-old son Joshua, her only hope was a scientist she found through the internet.
Jerry Hurst is one of these guys who kind of comes out of left field and actually saved the day in this case.
The findings of the State Bureau of Investigation and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms rested on the theory that the fire started on the floor of the bedroom closet. And when the cause couldn't be found, they concluded the fire had been deliberately set.
ATF, they call themselves arson investigators. The state call themselves arson investigators. That's what they're looking for, is arson. That's what they train for. That's what they go to school for, is to catch arsonists. What you want is a fire investigator to determine what caused the fire.
Dr. Hurst found evidence that the roof leaked in Terry's rented home, and tests revealed it washed away the flame-retardant chemicals on the paper insulation. He also found evidence of electrical malfunctioning. On the day of the fire, mysteriously, Terry's curling iron was going on and off. And during the fire, when Terry moved the space heater, it was cold to the touch. This indicated the heater had not been on for at least a half hour before the fire. The heater was plugged into a line originally designed for 15 amps. In the fuse box was a 30-amp fuse which had blown out.
That means that you're carrying more power through that wire than it was designed to carry. And when you overload it, it heats, it gets hot.
Cold snap, a 1,500-watt appliance on a line that had probably never seen that high a wattage before. And the question became, did that electrical line over the top of the closet feed the heater? Because if it did, you had a correlation. You had a potential cause and effect situation.
And that is exactly what he found. The cable in the attic fed the outlet used by the 1,500-watt space heater and the curling iron.
And that's what really frosted the cake for us. We had an origin, a cause that could not be disproven scientifically, and we had a connection between the differences in what was done that night and what had been done before. And that gives you a very strong presumptive case for an accidental fire.
Dr. Hurst believes several factors created the chain of events that culminated with the fatal fire. Water from the leaking roof washed the flame-retardant chemicals off of the paper insulation in the attic and further eroded the 50-year-old electrical cable. Over time, as the rainwater hit the exposed portion of the electrical cable, it arced, burning the wooden attic beam and leaving behind char marks or carbon tracks. Wood does not conduct electricity, but carbon does. Dr. Hurst believes that when Terry plugged in the 1,500-watt space heater that night, it heated the electrical wires in the attic, which arced. Those sparks touched a carbon track, which ignited the paper insulation just above Joshua's bedroom closet.
A wooden ceiling with an already well-built fire that suddenly breaks through produces a holocaust in no time at all.
The fiery debris from the attic fell through the hole in the ceiling onto the floor of the closet and did not start on the floor and burn upwards as local investigators suspected. Ken Gibson believes that the fire officials rushed to judgment.
So anything that doesn't fall into the theory that this was part of how the arsonist started the fire, to them it's not evidence, it's just something that's there.
Dr. Hurst sent the local prosecutor his critique of the government's investigation, which said their conclusions were based on junk science.
Not only is there a badly melted and arced fire, it had arc marks on it, which could have been caused by the fire, but which could also have initiated the fire. No way to tell. And that wire passed across dead center in the hole in the ceiling. Quite a coincidence.
To his credit, the district attorney studied Dr. Hurst's report, conducted his own investigation, and dropped the charges against Terry Hinson. But by the time it was all over, she had lost her home, her child, and nearly her freedom because of an inaccurate conclusion drawn from faulty science.
Fire investigation in general is the swamp of forensic science. In fact, many forensic scientists refuse to recognize arson investigation as a subfield of forensic science.
I think Terry's story in many respects is heroic. She was not a very well-educated woman, although she's extremely intelligent. And she had just enough computer studies at her community college to know that if she was going to be under house arrest, she needed some way where she could put herself out to the world, even if it was only through her computer and email.
There's people sitting in prison that have gone through what I've gone through, but they didn't have the help, they didn't know how to get it, didn't have the money, and that's not fair.
Terry Hinson cherishes her freedom and the time she spends with Brittany. Yet Terry thinks of Joshua every day. What he would have looked like. What kind of person he'd be. Remembering the good times.
Right, I'm going to call it, everybody.
I look around and I see.
I shall see you guys later on. Lots of love, and thank you so much for joining. Bye for now. Bye.